Hey guys, my name is Akshita. I'm a data analyst and a travel enthusiast.
I'm Anagh. I'm a finance bro and a tech geek. And you're listening to The Why Coordinate, the weekly podcast where we discuss the why behind human society and behavior.
Lessons from pop culture and our own experiences to lead a more intentional, efficient, and happy life.
Hi Akshita.
Hi Anagh, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. You sound very stressed. Are you okay?
Yes, I'm just tired of working
Tired.
the whole day. Yes, but you should be excited. I understand you're flying out on your surfing holiday tomorrow, early
Yes,
morning.
I'm so excited. Yes, early morning tomorrow. Looking forward to it, also dreading it because I made the mistake of going and watching videos of people falling when they're surfing, and I freaked out. And now all I can think of is the different injuries that I'll have. So I think bigger than my toiletries bag, I have a medicine kit now. So just
Wow,
prepping.
that is funny.
Yeah.
Maybe you should watch a few videos of people like just killing it while surfing
Yeah,
and
I did that. I didn't resonate with it. I know how clumsy I am. I'll probably be the one falling all over. But yes, let's see. I'll keep you posted with videos. Don't worry.
Fair enough. So, I'm very excited to introduce our guest for today. Akshita, do you want to go ahead and introduce her this?
Yes, sure. Uh, Today we have Swati. She's from Delhi in India, and I've had the pleasure of knowing her for the past 1 month. And Swati can take over her introduction, and I'm sure she's going to be a key part of today's discussion because she has a lot of pointers on what we're going to discuss today. So, Swati, if you can introduce yourself.
Thanks, Akshita. You've already set the expectations. Thank you, guys. Hi, I'm Swati Chawla. I work as an operations specialist in the financial services vertical of IHS market. So we work on providing high quality securities, lending, and borrowing data to investment banks and other financial institutions to help them take better decisions with their securities, basically. Prior to this, I worked in the carbon credit space for 2 years. I have a background in economics. I did my bachelor's in business economics from Delhi University and later pursued distance learning masters in economics while I was working at IHS Market. So this has been my journey since graduation. Outside of work, I like watching crime thriller, playing cards. I'm an active Toastmasters International Club member, and I'm also associated with this charitable trust Smile Foundation that helps in enabling equal education opportunities for underprivileged kids. And I'm really excited to be a part of the Y Coordinate, and I'm looking forward to talking to you guys regarding this.
We're excited to have you here, Swati. And Swati forgot to mention that she's an award-winning member of her Toastmasters chapter. She's won at her chapter level, at her city level, and now she's going to be participating at the regionals. If I'm not wrong, Swati, is that correct?
Yeah,
That's
that's right. I
awesome,
recently
Swati.
won.
Yes, I think I saw your story on Instagram, and that was cool. That's very nice. Congrats.
Thank you.
Okay, so introducing today's topic. So today's topic is stereotypes, more specifically, positive stereotypes. But let's start this discussions with why do stereotypes exist, and our experiences having faced either positive or negative stereotypes. Swati, would you like to start with your experiences?
Yeah, definitely. I think the reason stereotypes exist is because they start with something very random, and then people in future just inherit it without any reason in particular. My experience, so we've all faced it all, I think, in our lives in some way or the other. They're so ubiquitous that there's simply no escape. And everybody starts encountering them from a very young age. Now that's a separate story that we don't have that kind of an intellect at that point to recognize them. And that's where we start believing in them, and then we start endorsing them as and when we get older. But still, I would like to share the one time that I had a remarkable experience with them that I just can't get it out of my head. was it was when I started playing pool. I think I'm not sure if I've shared with any of you that I do play pool. Now we all know that the female representation in this game, at least here in India, is not very good. And same was the case with the place where I used to play. So entering that pool room every time, especially in the beginning when I just started learning, was so mentally exhausting. Being in the minority group in that particular area, people automatically start assuming that you would not be able to play as good as them or compete with them. So there were two stages basically, and both of them were pretty interesting. Just notice the difference. So when I was learning, when I was in the learning phase, what I faced was even the people that started playing after me, that started playing the game after me, they don't know me at all. They used to enter the room, used to start playing, and there began the mansplaining. Your next shot should be this, and why don't you try try doing this? And mind it, I'm talking here about the ones who had just started playing. Now I'm completely grateful of those people, since they might have that intention to help me out, but automatically assuming that I would not be able to figure out the stuff as well as them, since I was a minority there, and assuming this even before they saw me playing was definitely problematic. And the bigger problem is nobody would be able to fathom out that there was a slight problem in the entire situation there. And then came the period when my game became, I would say, satisfactory. Then I started noticing how few people used to behave differently, and by differently I mean worse. When I used to beat them, then when they probably lost to a guy. So most of them were very gracious, but a few of them making those unpalatable remarks showed how they were frustrated because they couldn't live up to the expectations set by a certain stereotype that they are supposed to be better at that game. So these sort of expectations come uninvited with these stereotypes.
Wow, that is, I mean, remarkable is probably a good adjective for that. Uh, Mostly because I, I as a guy suck at pool. Okay, so the only times I've ever won a game of pool is when you have the last eight ball that you have to get in shot, and if you scratch on that, you basically lose to the opponent. And that's happened to my opponents a few times, and that's the only way I won. So automatically assuming that since you're a female you'll not be good at it, or you will always, I mean, this is what I found quite amusing about the story, is that okay, people who get good at something, they have a habit of going around and giving advice to people. You like, I see this at the gym all the time. The guy who's most ripped and swole will go around advising people even if they're not asking for his advice. But what is interesting is to see that people who are mere beginners, who probably started playing much after you, also feel that just because you're a female, they would have the requisite expertise to advise you. So yeah.
It's
um,
actually quite funny, Swati, because this exact same thing has happened to me. And you know what? I didn't even think about it till you were like telling a story. And then I realized the entire point of a stereotype is that it's widespread, right? It's a random thing, but as you said, it's inherited and then it just exists. And when you were telling me that story, I was in a different city, a different environment with a different group of people, but the exact same thing kept happening to me. So I also used to play pool from a not a very young age, but from before it was. So I used to have to illegally enter my clubhouse to play it because I was 16 and there was like an 18-year-old, like you need to be 18 plus to go and play pool. So I was 16 and I was playing pool, and my father used to teach me. And once I started becoming better at it, the men used to look at me as a child and a female. So it was both of it together. These guys, these like elder, I think 28, 25 plus ish men used to come in, and then I used to play. And then I used to get the exact same two phases what you're talking about. And it's just so funny looking at how, even though we were miles apart and we were in different parts of the country, this exact same stereotype even worked for me. So very interesting to think of that. So
what about
so this is one.
okay, so these are some negative stereotypes, but how about some positive stereotypes? Have you guys experienced any of those? So one positive stereotype, I don't even know if it's positive. It could probably be a neutral stereotype. Is that Indians are IT guys, and Indians are good at solving technology problems. and that is a stereotype that I've faced throughout my life living in the West. And ironically, I am good at solving IT problems, so that continued to reinforce that stereotype. In fact, at my grad school, they had a technology advisory cabinet, which basically advised the university on where to invest their money in terms of like what tech to buy and stuff like that, and was only made up of Indians in a American university. So yeah, that is my experience with not a negative but like positive or neutral stereotype. Do you guys have other examples?
I think so. In terms of positive stereotypes, I've lived across India. I've lived in the northern states, and I've lived in the southern states as well. I'm right now in Bangalore, and wherever I've lived, I've always seen a stereotype for the other side of the country. So I don't know if this is a positive or a neutral stereotype, but so South Indians are generally known to be more intellectual and also more calm and composed, while versus North Indians or Punjabis or people from Delhi are more fun-loving, boisterous. They like to party. So, and I mean, and in a way, it's a very it's a positive thing, right? I don't know if it's a neutral thing or a positive thing. In a way, for me, I take it as a positive stereotype because yes, obviously, why would anyone want to take that if you're a party loving person or you're someone who's good at studies, or like South Indians are supposed to be the good studious ones who really are focused on what they want to do and then get through. So I take this as positive stereotypes, but we will go forward and discuss how this can be not a nice thing. But Swati, do you have any positive stereotype experiences or examples?
Being a North Indian and Punjabi, I think there's one stereotype that that is applicable to I think all the Indians, that Indians generally score higher on these competitive exams. So when I was talking to this American guy and I told him my cons and verbal score, I mean, so there's a general perception that Indians have a higher average at GMAT or whatever exam. So and he was like, yeah, so what's the big deal for you? What's the big deal that you've scored this greatly at cons? I mean, Indians are generally great. Indians and or I would say Asians. So this is a general stereotype that Asians are great are good at maths. So he said that what's the big deal with it? I mean, aren't Asians generally good at maths? So I think although it's a positive stereotype, but the problem with this is that I and or not me, I think people generally don't get the credit of their hard work. I mean, I have put an equal amount of hard work as he did, but I'm not getting the credit for that. So even after being a positive stereotype, I don't know, the impact that it had in my mind was not necessarily very positive after that conversation.
So a
True.
similar story for, I mean, I don't think it's a similar story, but when you mentioned this entire thing about scoring higher, Indians or Asians generally stereotypically are known to score higher in these competitive exams. So during my college search and applications and everything, I had actually not given my GMAT exam till at that point, and I did not know what score I would get, but I was in a lower range, a very low range of what the average Indian score is. And that's what I spoke to this admissions consultants, went to ask them, so how does my score where does it lie and what schools can I apply to? What are your thoughts about it? And the stereotype was the main reason why most of the consultants absolutely refused to go forward with helping, or they just said that okay, fine, you're well below the Indian average of for these competitive exams. And surprisingly, when I actually gave the exam, I got a higher than the Indian average. And then these same consultants then came back to me saying that, would you like us to, would you want our services and would you want to go forward and look at these schools because now you're eligible for these schools. And as you said, even though this might be a positive stereotype that, yeah, Asians are better or they are more quant enabled, but it didn't really have like that positive feeling on me, because and I just felt that what am I defined by a number just because stereotype or like Indians are supposed to be like that, and if I'm not able to fit into that particular category of Indians because of some other reasons, how am I different? So I think what you just said, that I didn't really feel very positive about that positive stereotype. So as soon as you said that, yeah, I remember the story of mine.
Yeah, that is true. So basically, when there is a positive stereotype associated with you, it takes away from your experience, your struggle to kind of get that or execute on that, whether it's when it comes to academics for Asians, or let's say Africans are generally stereotyped to be very good at athletics, or so. I mean, for example, if Usain Bolt runs very fast, it's not because some of it is genetic, but then also it kind of discounts his years of training and hard work and nutrition and all of that he's gone through. Like, it kind of discounts all of that and reduces him into just a stereotype itself, that oh, he's African, he's an African, so obviously he's going to be running very fast. And then similarly with women, there's a stereotype that they're more empathetic, more calm, as opposed to men who are supposed to be stereotyped to be more hot-blooded. And I mean, so there, it does open up a can of worms. The first one, of course, being that you feel kind of forced to meet that stereotype. What if you're an Asian who's extremely bad at math? You're going to be you're going to feel more pressure to be good at math than as opposed to someone from an ethnicity where math is not supposed to be like a thing that they're good at, and you feel suffocated, you feel dissociated. uh, the other challenge or the other problem I see with this is that we've basically reduced an individual to their race, their gender, or their ethnicity, and we've completely discounted their individuality, where you are just your like the social group that you belong.
I agree. So to add on another one, I mean, just another example which popped up into my head when you were saying this. So I was having this conversation with a friend who had just gone for a big fat Indian Punjabi wedding, which is again a stereotype. Our global listeners might not resonate or relate to this, but North Indian weddings are generally very big, very 5 days of just fun, a lot of events. And this another friend of mine who is from North India, who is from Delhi, but her sister was getting married, but she was not having the same wedding, the same 5 days of wedding. It was just a 1 day ceremony, how it generally is, just the religious ceremony, and that's it. And then these two friends of mine were talking about why is she not following the big fat Indian wedding way of it. And they sent that up of like, oh, you're North Indian, why aren't you doing this? Like, this is the thing we look forward to, going to such weddings. And that entire conversation about why you're not doing this, and as Anagh mentioned, we are then obliged to fit into a certain type of social group, irrespective of what you are capable of or what you want. Now, we don't know if that person is financially capable of having such a big wedding, or even wants to have such a big wedding or not. But just because of the fact that, so in society, it's a stereotype that, yeah, okay, we know it as a big fat Indian wedding. It was that conversation got heated. So basically, even though it's a great thing, it's a positive stereotype, but it definitely did not work well because of what Anand just said.
Yeah, and the third problem I see with positive stereotypes is that generally, if someone believes in positive stereotypes, or if someone brings up positive stereotypes, they're more likely to also bring up negative. It also kind of ties back to talking about people, reducing them to social groups. Like, for example, there was a study conducted by Professor Alan Kay from the Fuqua School of Business, which is also my alma mater, where he interviewed people and showed them a conversation between a white and black person talking about either negative stereotypes or positive stereotypes, and then asked them whether um, black people are more like, for example, then asked them about whether someone was more likely to commit a crime or not. And what he found was that when you highlight the fact that uh, even if you highlight the positive stereotype, those people were, as opposed to the control where there was no stereotype highlighted. When the fact that Africans are more athletic was highlighted, those test subjects were more likely to say that they might be, if a crime has been committed, they might be a higher probability as a suspect, which kind of goes to show that when you bring in stereotypes into the equation, whether positive or negative, the others, like the if it's positive, the negative will also come into play somehow or the other, which is again not a good thing.
Uh, even I read about this study, and I think I'm not wrong. It's called as a dovetailing effects. So, in which most of the positive stereotypes are often accompanied by certain negative perceptions about some other thing. For instance, if a particular section of the society is naturally perceived as more nurturing than the other, more caring, it's often accompanied by a very weird perception that the group would have lower intellectual ability. I mean, let's try to think it on a more broader term. I'm sure since we've been brought up in such an environment, we are more socially aware. We might straight away reject this narrative, but on a wider scale, it does exist, and we are so aware of it. So this is the dovetailing effect. You're unintentionally carrying a negative perception when you believe in an altogether different positive stereotype.
Yeah, very true. And then what also ends up happening is, like for example, women are supposed to be more empathetic, more nurturing, more caring, and that and they feel so under pressure to kind of meet that stereotype, that when it comes to say being more vocal at the workplace, or being taking up more aggressive leadership roles, where you have to go kind of contrary to these stereotype or characteristics that have been defined for you, they start finding it like they don't do that. So this is another example of how like a positive stereotype ends up being not desired.
That reminds me of another very interesting perspective now that you've brought this topic of women being more nurturing and more careful. Another very interesting perspective of why positive stereotypes are probably even worse than the negative ones is positive stereotypes can lead people to regard the current system of the society as legitimate. For instance, if there's a positive stereotype in the world about a particular group that you belong to, since we tend to accept the positive stereotypes about us easily, we would think that yeah, probably because this is correct, then probably the way stereotypes work in the entire world is legitimate, and this makes people less likely to take any action against them. On the other hand, negative ones will reinforce the motivation inside the people to fight against this particular issue.
Yeah, very, very, very true. Like positive stereotypes just fly under the radar. No one really talks about it because on the face of it, it seems like a good thing. And that is why can be more harmful than negative stereotypes, because we, like you said, we've become more aware. Our generation is very, pro social causes and smashing negative stereotypes. But positive stereotypes seem like a good thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Swati. I actually hadn't really thought of it that way. The fact that positive stereotypes actually go under the radar because it's perceived as positive, but in the end, it is causing the harm that it does. So that's a very good point.
And that is why I feel talking about this particular issue becomes all the more important, because when we think of the word stereotype, we tend to imagine words such as violent or emotional, threatening, and being Punjabi, the most common one that we get to hear is loud. So these are the adjectives that come to our mind. We tend to ignore some of the positive stereotypes that we get to hear as frequently, such as intelligent, athletic, well-behaved, nurturing. But what we don't realize is that these stereotypes, because the very nature of these words, since they're complementary, they are difficult to spot. But just because these sound good doesn't mean that they're okay. They more often than not have unintended harmful effects on the stereotype groups and on others also. Other than the personal effects they have on us, I think stereotypes can cause effects on a much larger scale. They have a way of infiltrating our brains, and they have this destructive power of making people act differently than what they would have otherwise without them knowing. And there are proven studies in this, and my favorite one is this concept called the stereotype threat. I'm sure you must have heard of it, because we'll be able to relate to it and feel that yes, this is exactly why I feel this way when I hear a stereotype about my race or sex or nationality.
True. Okay, so now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how do you think this problem can be solved at like an individual level and more at like a society level as well. How do you think going about, like, how should we go about squashing? So I'll let me start by talking about like my experiences. So Indians or brown people in general have a certain set of stereotypes associated with them, which I mean, okay, fine. There is some truth to stereotypes. Maybe a majority of that society, or that part of society, does fall under the stereotype that's associated with them. But obviously, human beings are very diverse, and they will be all come in all sorts of. Now, if you talk about areas like, for example, when I lived in the U.S. and I was living in cities where there were not a lot of Indians or brown people in that area, most of the people around there, their perception of what an Indian person is stemmed from stereotypes that they'd seen in popular media. Whereas when I lived in cities which were extremely cosmopolitan, such as New York or London, where the average Londoner would have been exposed to at least a dozen Indians and different kinds of Indians. There, they were more likely to see me as an individual, and rather than reducing me to just a stereotype that they heard about on the internet or on a TV show.
True, true. I think that's a good point. Um, I think how to reduce or to actually point out stereotypes would also be a very big part of self-awareness. I mean, we are all in a way stereotypical. I mean, I'm sure in any conversation during a day, I'm sure at least once I um, fix someone in a box. I fit someone into a stereotype up subconsciously. It's not like I'm doing it proactively, but because I've grown up and because I've seen and heard that stereotype around me, it's become such a common and such a natural part of speaking. And I think self-awareness really is important, because once you start realizing that when you yourself are making those stereotypes, you will at least be able to identify what are the positives, what are the negatives, and educate, not educate, that sounds very preachy, but at least let others know when they are doing the same. And I think when you actively know that you're actually reducing someone to a set of rules or a set of statements made about them, you'll proactively start thinking twice about what you say.
Also, I think you've made a very good point about people realizing the narrative or the history behind these stereotypes. There are certain stereotypes, whether positive or not, that are driven by a certain propaganda. And if we get to know the history behind that propaganda, then probably we'll be able to make things easier for you. For instance, there's this model minority narrative that applies to Asian Americans, that they're more intelligent and hence have been able to be more successful as compared to the other minorities in the US. This often gives reasons to those practicing the discrimination that, since Asian Americans are naturally more intelligent, that's why they've been able to become more successful than other minorities. But this narrative does not take into account tons of other factors that probably the treatment that has been historically given by the government or the policies were in the favor of one particular minority. So these stereotypes acts as a way to get away with the discrimination happening with other minorities, and they only work for as long as it's working in the favor of those in power. So not only the stereotypes that are generated by the people, but people realizing the stereotypes that are driven by the propaganda. By realizing this, I think this situation can be handled.
And another thing I feel is that if you have role models which kind of squash these stereotypes, so like when Obama became president of the US, that helped to squash a lot of stereotypes related to African Americans. So if you have, or these days, a lot of Asians and South Asians are getting prominent roles in movies and TV shows in Hollywood, and they're kind of now squashing the tropes that these ethnicities fell into. So that is another way to squash.
Now that you've mentioned about President Obama, I remember a certain speech made by somebody when Hillary Clinton was, running for the presidential elections, and that person in power said in his official speech that we need more women leaders as the presidents in power because women are this and that. So if we analyze this. The problem with this mentality is that as Anand just mentioned that we are not seeing Clinton as an individual with her unique qualities. We are categorizing her because of the gender that she belongs to. So let's just be honest. These stereotypes are not going anywhere. All we can do is minimize their impact. So the next time, probably we are praising someone publicly, we should make sure that we are doing that by pointing out their unique qualities as an individual and not by using the positive stereotypes they hold about their race or nationality or sex. And the same should apply for criticizing anyone.
Very true. I think the reason why we use, like, for example, you mentioned cognitive biases in our last episode. The reason why we use stereotypes is because they're an easy heuristic. Instead of taking the time and effort to really get to know someone or really understand them, it's easy to put them in a box and just treat them based off of. So yeah, we have to be more aware and conscious on how we treat and think about things. Should we? Is there anything else you guys would like to add to the discussion, or I can get to recapping everything we've discussed?
Yeah, I think we can start the recapping. I think we've covered a lot of good points and perspectives on this.
Okay. All right. So we started off the discussion with talking about stereotypes, the kind of examples and our own experiences with it. Swati mentioned, and Akshita also mentioned, when you guys go play pool, women are generally not thought of as very good pool players, and men who might be more of a novice were giving advice to you on how to go about playing it. So that was very interesting for me to know. Also, take away for me is that I'm going to get both of you to teach me how to play pool because I suck at it. Then moving forward, we talked about how positive stereotypes, even more than negative ones, tend to are harmful because they tend to fly under the radar. We don't give too much attention to it, and we think it's a good thing to have. But it is problematic for various reasons. The first one being that we basically box an individual to their ethnicity, gender, or nationality. Then the other thing is that these people then feel it discounts their struggle or their endeavor. Like, for example, Swati mentioned her hard work for preparing for these exams and then scoring well in like the quant subjects was discounted as compared to someone else from another country doing the same thing because Indians are good at quant. So if you worked hard and you scored good, that's like no kudos to you. Or like if Usain Bolt runs very fast, just because he's African discounts his training and nutrition and everything else he's gone through. And then second is it reduces people down to boxes. And third, people feel suffocated to meet those stereotypes. So, for example, if you're a nation who sucks at math, you'll feel more pressure to perform in that as opposed to someone who's not a nation. And then finally, people who believe in positive stereotypes generally also tend to believe in negative stereotypes. And then finally, we talked about how we can kind of combat this. The first and foremost being more aware about it, being aware about stereotypes and people putting people in boxes that we do throughout our day. Second is just people being more exposed to from your ethnicity. So, like, for example, um, like when I experienced being in cities where the average citizen might not have met a lot of Indians, their perception of Indians really of the stereotypes they'd seen on the internet or TV shows. Whereas if it was a cosmopolitan city like New York or London, where they had been exposed to a lot of Indians, there they started seeing people individually, and then having role models who squash these stereotypes as well, whether it is President Obama or it is Asians or South Asians in Hollywood. like Kunal Nanjiani or Simu for Asians. These people are also squashing stereotypes, which is good. And then, like finally, Swati mentioned that if we do end up praising someone, we should recognize them for their individuality rather than the box that they belong to. So, for example, if Hillary Clinton is a good candidate for being a president, that's not because she's a woman and she's empathetic, but it is because she's Hillary Clinton and she's empathetic. Is there anything else that I might have missed out on that you guys would like to add to the summary?
Kudos to your memory, Anagh. I think you covered almost every point with all the examples that we spoke about. So, yes, nothing to add. That was great.
All right, thank you. So let's move on to the final segment, which is the insightful slash funny incident of the week. And this time I have absolutely nothing. So would either of you ladies want to volunteer and go first?
Um, I don't have anything insightful or funny, but I can just talk about how there was an incident, not an incident this week, but I had my medical test this week. For me, that was a big incident in itself because I'm deadly scared of needles. Like I'm really, really, really scared. Just thinking about it makes me actually physically cry. And I'm not even overselling it. It's just how it is. And I had that medical test and I think I was freaking out for 24 hours before that. Anyone in and around me, like my life, knew about the fact that I'm going to have a medical test and I'm freaking out about the needles and the blood test that's going to come with it. And I'm sure Anagh has also heard a good amount of me freaking out on it. Yeah, he was just like, oh, look forward to it. Don't worry, it's fine. But yeah. And I reached the medical center, I think half an hour in advance. And all the time that I was busy, I didn't really think of it because I like this paperwork, that paperwork, go pay this fees, that fees. But the second you sit down in front of that table or in front of that room, that blood test room, and you need to wait for that 20-30 minutes is when like the anticipation starts and you start freaking out. And it's very like I realize how psychological it is because when I was there and when I was busy, I didn't really think of it at all. But then the second I got that time to actually freak out about it, I was freaking out. And then again, when I actually had to enter the room, it was all like quick, very quick. Like, do submit this there, you need to go in there, get in fast. So I didn't have any time to think. And surprisingly, this was the first time in the 24 years of my life that I did not cry during a blood test. So I told the nurse very clearly, if I cry, I am so sorry. Please do not get scared. It's just me. And the nurse was such a sweetheart. She was so sweet. She was trying to like talk to me like how you talk to a kid, trying to distract the kid from something. And she's talking to me, and then she's like, don't worry, it's done, don't worry at all. And then after she's taken the blood, she was asking me, do you want to see the blood test tube? And I'm like, no, thank you so much for the offer, but I am not going to do that at all. And yeah, I came out and then I realized that just because I was busy the entire time, or she was talking to me constantly, or there was some paperwork happening, and whenever I was not thinking about it, I was fine. But whenever my brain or my like mind was empty, I was freaking out. So next time I'm going to make sure I'm like very, very busy the entire time so that I don't have that 24 hours of crying phase for my blood test, mini blood test. Yeah, that's it.
Well, congratulations on getting your first blood test without tears. But
Yay,
yeah, I think the
thank
point you
you.
raised is very valid because, like, for example, when you go give exams, or at least when I go give exams, the minutes before the exam starts, I'm very stressed and I'm trying to think about what I don't know. But when the exam starts and the paper is in front of me, or if I have to go give an interview, once the interview starts, or if I have to give a presentation to a large group of people, like once it starts, it just you don't have time to think about how nervous you are. But the anticipatory minutes before that are extremely, extremely brutal. Which is why I hate super days where you have like interviews back to back, and like, I mean they are supposed to be on the same day, but then they make you wait for many, many minutes or even hours between two interviews, and at that point of time your self-confidence probably declines at a exponential rate, which is not good. But yes, how about you, Swati? Do you have any funny or insightful incident of the week or slash month?
Akshita reminded me of a very insightful incident that happened with me today. So a person removed his mask in front of me and he sneezed and then he put his mask on. So this is very insightful to see how the world operates. Fun fact in it, the person was a doctor who was conducting my medical test.
Oh
Oh
my God,
wow.
I have nothing to say to this.
No, I would like to request people to not stereotype the doctors. I mean, doctors in India are not like that. They're very qualified and great. This is just one-off incident, but this was very insightful. So I just felt like sharing it with everybody.
I like how Swati is using the word insightful for this, and it feels very insightful to see how it is. Yeah, I think I've seen that as well. People actually take the effort to remove their mask and sneeze into their hand or whatever, and they wear the mask back. Like, buddy, I think you're missing the point, but okay.
How
and
about you,
and also
Anagh?
so yeah, when I went to Delhi last weekend and I'd go to these markets and places, I would see people like wearing a mask with like it pulled down their mouth or it pulled above their nose. Like at that point of time, it almost became like a fashion accessory than the intention, like the purpose it was intended for.
I agree. I think now it's
Uh,
just a fashion accessory, at least in and around the like places I know. Yeah.
uh, and I mean, when you have rules and people don't know why those rules are being implemented and they just do it for the sake of doing it, it leads to interesting phenomena. Like I remember in like the early 2000s, in New Delhi, the fact that your car needs to have a seat belt became compulsory. Before that, it wasn't compulsory, so cars did not have seat belts. And I was going in this taxi, and that guy had a seat like we weren't wearing seat belts, and then you could see like he saw that there was a traffic cop ahead of us, and he was like, put on the seat belt. So he had like this thing that looked like a seat belt, but it had nowhere to buckle in. So he said, hold, just pull it and hold on to it while we drive by the police officer, and then you can take it off. And I was like, at that point you might as well have invested in a buckle as well and have it function as a seat belt. But again, a symptom of when people don't understand why rules are in place.
This reminds me, I think I've seen those videos or memes of, how your car keeps beeping unless you've worn a seatbelt. And there's this new product or this gadget or something that's just the buckle that goes into the seatbelt. There's no belt. It's just one small buckle that goes into uh, the buckle part of it, and the beeping stops. And people actually buy that and not wear the seatbelt. So I'm very intrigued to know what goes on behind the minds of such people who would actually pay extra to buy that gadget to just buckle it to stop the beeping versus actually just wear the seatbelt, which is for their own benefit. But yes, interesting.
Damn. I feel like my taxi driver would have been the first person to buy that gadget.
For
Um,
sure.
so
Another, I think, pretty funny incident that has happened with me recently was so we have this daily catch-up call in which we have all the teammates gather at 2 to 2:30 p.m. So it's like a daily call. So I was attending it a few days ago, and the topic of the conversation shifted from work to football for some reason. And people, the call stretched for another 20 minutes, and people kept talking about it, about the league. Meanwhile, what I saw is, so my father entered my room and he saw that I was on a call. So he asked whether he can speak and whether I was on mute. So I he started. So I just blatantly said, yeah, they're anyway not talking business, Papa. Just come and talk to me. They've been talking about this football thing for a long time. And so, yeah, tell me. And the next thing I hear is, Swati, you could have complained it to us directly. And that was the point I realized that I had muted my phone via this earphone. And my earphone was connected to my laptop and not to my mobile with which I was, receiving that call. And and what reminded me of this incident is, I don't know if you guys have seen the Shweta episode going on Instagram these
Yes,
days, the girl who
yes.
forgets to put a speaker on mute. So that was another tragedy that happened to me
I think this has
recently.
now become a very occupational hazard for everyone. I think every one of us has had this experience or this situation where they've not for me, I've had a video experience, not even an audio. Like I've forgotten to switch off my video, and I mean, I didn't do anything
I would
scandalous
love
at
to know
all.
what were you doing.
I did not do anything scandalous at all. But yeah, I just started moving around and just being casual. And then I got a call from my manager on my phone saying that the meeting's going on. Can you please sit and attend it? And I'm just like, okay, oops, just oops. That's all I had to say. But yeah, very funny, sorry.
I think, yeah, thank you so much, Swati, for taking time out and joining us today. It was, I mean, not only did you join us today, you were so enthusiastic about the topic of discussion as well. I think we had an amazing discussion. And thank you, Akshita, as well, for joining. And just a few hours before your flight, you have you hear recording. So thank you for that, and thank you to everyone who listens. I think we're at now 4.5 listeners now.
4.5. I like it. Yes. Thank you
but
so much.
honestly,
Yeah.
we're
Thank you so much, Anagh, first of all, for
yeah.
being driving this properly and making sure that it's like so. Even though I have a flight tomorrow, in a few hours, I'm as excited for this podcast. Like this podcast was in my priority. I've not even done my packing, but I really wanted to do this recording. So thank you, Anna, for making it always, always so much fun. And thank you so much, Swati, for joining in today. It was a very insightful topic, very insightful conversation, and I think all of our funny events made it even better. Like, yeah. Thank you so much for joining, Swati.
So we'll see all of you guys again on new episode Saturdays 6:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll catch you guys next week. So Swati, how was your experience being on the Y coordinate?
Needless to say that I enjoyed it the most. More because you guys were very cooperative. It didn't feel like an interview or something. It was the way it was flowing was amazing. I guess this was the best thing about it. And another thing, as I already mentioned, this topic is very close to my heart, and I wanted to talk to something about it and know their perspective as well. So the entire experience was just inexplicably good. And the only thing I'm worried about is how am I going to sound on a podcast, because this is my first time and I don't know how will I sound on a recorded podcast. So that's probably the only concern that I have.
You know what,
Rest of the
Swati?
things were amazing.
Fun fact, I hate how I sound like in a recorded
Likewise.
yes. And so I've just skipped over all the parts I've been talking in all of the podcasts that I've heard, like or my podcast that we hear. And I just skip over the parts that I'm talking because I still cringe at the voice and like your own sound. And I think this is a very common, as you said, that this is very common. So don't worry, I think you were perfect. Absolutely
Same boat.
perfect.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it, Swati. You were quite nice, and when I'm on the recording table, I'll give my feedback again. But uh, I feel like we're our harshest critics. Even I don't like listening to my voice, and then I mean, Akshita says she doesn't like listening to her voice, but when she speaks, I feel like I have a crow stuck in my throat when I'm speaking. So it's like you like everyone else's voices except your own.
It's too true. I think
But
this
I think
whatever this logic is, it's too true. Yeah, the thing.
all right then. We'll catch you guys in the next one.